And now here's part 2 of our episode. Allison, why is that the standout track from the album?
Because it is the point in the movie where everything kind of comes together. And I don't know that I'm going to be able or would even necessarily want to make the argument that it's the best song on the album.
Okay.
You know, I had a couple others too that I was tossing back and forth. But, you know, going back to what I was saying about what makes a great soundtrack, I think what makes a great song on the soundtrack is the point in time in the movie that is the most climactic, the most exciting. You know, I mentioned before, whenever I listen to this song, I perform it. I am Gina, you know, the lead, living her, you know, lifelong teenage dream to sing in a rock band, you know, on the rooftop of a record store. And, you know, there's such excitement under that. And that's, you know, like it's such an emotional, like cathartic release moment for all the characters. I mean, all the characters that we like in the movie.
Gina played by Renee Zellweger. Just want to also like put that out there. Like when people are like, oh my God, Renee Zellweger's in this movie. Yes, she is.
I mean, this cast is stacked. Robin Tunney, Liv Tyler, Ethan Embry, even like Rory Cochrane, Anthony LaPaglia, Maxwell Caulfield from Grease 2, lest we forget, and a very underutilized Debbie Mazar.
Debbie Mazar, I was gonna say, if Debbie Mazar's in something, you know she's gonna slay. I really like her a lot.
Yeah.
I think if there was any point I was going to quibble with about this particular song being the standout track, and I think what you're saying actually contributes to this, is the version in the movie is way better than the album version because you get the Renee. You don't get the Renee effect, if you will.
and I would concede. I would concede all of those points because it's so true. It's so true.
I'm still going to give you 10,000 points for this being the standout track because it represents kind of the coming together of all the threads. Because it can be, you know, at only 90 minutes, it's kind of overwhelming to watch in a lot of ways. Like they treat every scene's kind of directed like it's the you know the climactic moment of the movie. And so to actually have the moment at the end with this party, and didn't we all want to go to some crazy party at a record store where there were kegs of beer and people on the roof? Like, who didn't want to go to that kind of thing when you were a kid?
Yeah, absolutely.
So 10,000 points for that.
I do also want to say one of the other tracks that you were considering, if indie music cred meant anything, I would like to say that the other song you were thinking of, The Ballad of El Goodo, which is technically a cover. Evan Dando covered this by Big Star. So I mean, like, talk about you got some indie cred for that too, for that being one of your favorites on this album.
like the soundtrack, I Contain Multitudes.
There might be a moment for us to just like kind of acknowledge we've talked about them a little bit, but just to kind of like round out the rest of who shows up in this movie, who contributes to it. Like you said, Liv Tyler, who kind of, I think so. Coyote Shivers who sings Sugar High. Coyote Shivers was dating Liv Tyler's mom at the time, BB Buell. Poor Liv Tyler. I mean, poor Liv Tyler. She's great, whatever, you know. But like, just everybody talking about who her parents are having sex with. Like, what an existence!
And Rock and Roll Legacy, you know.
Rock and Roll Legacy. We also get, like you said, Rory Cochrane and an early Renee Zellweger. That I think she's really really effective in this, and they all, you can kind of feel them all buying into it, which I think makes it work.
We left out an actor. I mean, how can we forget the great Johnny Whitworth, who has gone on to so much after Empire? I looked up. I was curious to see. He's still been acting. He had. Okay, wait a minute. We got to get this on the pod because we don't want Johnny to think we left him out.
No.
He was on 10 episodes of The 100, 6 episodes of a show called Blind Spot. He had 11 episodes on CSI Miami, and apparently there's some other stuff coming out soon. I don't know. Just, you know, let's acknowledge AJ. Who, look, if you took his character AJ, Lucas, and Mark and like smush them all together, you would get every boy in a 90s teen movie.
Oh yeah. The hair, the
I mean,
flannel.
that hair, yeah. I'd kill for that hair right now that he has in the movie.
He's going to art school. All of those things.
He is just so boring, though.
No,
I mean, it's so infuriatingly like bland to have like the AJ and Corey's like relationship even anywhere near the center of this movie is just an ongoing source of frustration. I think it's when I was watching, I had to laugh as like he's like trying to think about how he's going to tell Corey he loves her, and he's like, "You remind me of a bath," and he's like, "No, that's terrible." And it is like what he lands on. He's like, "No, you remind me of vanilla ice cream, French vanilla ice cream." I'm like, that is not better. It might be true, like, yeah, that might be the accurate way to describe your love story, but like, it's just so sad.
Right, there was something missing there.
Yeah.
And they have these, I think there's something about that anti-establishment attitude, right? Like they really feel like they're all scratching the surface of that, of like really, really actually diving into what that means for them. Robin Tunney's character, Deb is her name, right? She's a perfect example of this, like the shaved head Sinead O'Connor thing, and she gets called Sinead O'Connor, right? So like
Sinead O'Connor.
Yeah, exactly. So they're telegraphing all of these things. I wonder if by all of these characters kind of acting as archetypes of our like 90s white kid characters in these movies, it sort of fits really well with how this music is, like you say, archetypally 90s, down to the Toad the Wet Sprocket.
No one's brought up Toad the Wet Sprocket. I think this is the first time Toad the Wet Sprocket is making an appearance on this podcast.
I'll give you 60,000 points for that.
They had some real 90s bangers. They are a classic like 90s pop rock band that I was not ashamed to like. So
absolutely not. They're great.
Got me thinking just now, and this is something that I think is really true about the soundtrack, is, when you look at all of the music that is a part of the film, and actually, so many different songs that have a much, much bigger role in the movie itself than, some of the tracks that, ended up on the soundtrack. And I think it really does, it feels really cohesive because of that 90s vibe, that 90s tone. All of the songs are a part of that world, so we don't get like, we don't get Money, we don't get Hey Joe, we don't get the Dire Straits, Romeo and Juliet, some of these other like total bangers that I think, would have been really great to, highlight on a soundtrack. But it just, for all of the chaos of the 90s of the, and the movie itself, that there is a real cohesion, I think, to the soundtrack because of that.
Yeah. The music feels tied. The music that made it to the soundtrack feels tied to the world of these characters. Whereas, all those other great songs just feel like they're part of, I guess, the story. But if you want to get a sense of like the essence of the people who inhabit this record store, it's the soundtrack.
And it's a snapshot in time. This
is a time capsule soundtrack, most definitely. We asked you to provide us with a perfect album, but we didn't define the word perfect for you. And you also considered a couple others, but I don't want you to mention those two others that you mentioned because I told you that we are actually covering them this season, the two non-soundtrack albums you suggested. What were your standards for perfection? How did you arrive at this particular one?
I'm going to quote Lucas with a perfect, well, not entirely perfect line from the film. And I think for me, I love the soundtrack. I listen to it often. There are some, tracks on this that have like transcended the sort of background listen of the soundtrack and are, kind of in heavy rotation in other playlists and music that I listen to. But I do think it goes back to the way music serves Empire Records as a film, as a piece of cinema, as a movie. The cult classic nature of the movie, totally bombed at the box office. You know, it was not something that had a lot of impact, I think, on folks until maybe a few years later, you know, maybe until it was, you know, on VHS, which I absolutely owned. The music is the heart and soul of the movie. You know, it is another, you know, misfit character, you know, on the island of misfit toys that is the record store. You know, it is, you know, you sometimes hear, you know, people talk about like, oh, New York is a character in this movie. The music, the soundtrack is absolutely another character in this movie.
I'll give you 20,000 points for that. I think if I read correctly, it was already testing so badly that they only put it in like 8,000 theaters across the country, which is crazy. And also The Big Lebowski, they say the same thing about that it kind of bombed when it first came out, but then because of VHS and reruns on cable, it gained that second life. But it didn't have this soundtrack element that added another entry point for people to rediscover it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a point in its favor that this is, we don't see that so often, where a movie that is, you know, there's no objectivity about it, a movie that is kind of like less good, right? It's not a good movie, but by getting the message out through the quality of its soundtrack, it sort of overcomes that, like you said. So I appreciate that point.
I appreciate you saying that it feels like it's tied to the story, but also like when I was re-listening to it for this episode, I found it to be just kind of this comforting wall of sound that was in the background. Like it kind of felt like I was in a record store again, and it was just playing in the background. I mean, because, you know, I guess, I don't know who says this, they, you know, the proverbial they say that you will always be defined by the music that you listened to in your teens and 20s. That is who you will always be for the rest of your life. Maybe that's why I just can't get into Olivia Rodrigo, even though people tell me that I should, because she's inspired by people that I listened to. But listening to this just felt like, oh yeah, it's me hanging out at the Tower Records at Broad and Chestnut when that still existed in Philly, and just, I know, R.I.P. Tower Records, right? Like, which that one, Tyler, you never got to see this in Philly because it was gone by that point, but I would argue that the Tower Records that existed in Center City, Philadelphia, bore a little slight resemblance to the layout of the record store at Empire Records. Oh, really? Yeah, I think so.
I love it.
So you are a big fan of this movie and the soundtrack, and you have supplied us with a picture from when you are cosplaying as Mark. Was this an Empire Records themed party? Was this a 90s themed party? What was the occasion for you inhabiting the heart and soul of one Mr. Ethan Embry?
This moment in time was a screening, a screening of said film, Empire Records, at the Trocadero, also R.I.P. The Troc used to do these really awesome, like, theme night movie nights upstairs. So they would just, like, screen the movie. They would have drink specials. I think you got, like, I don't know if you got, like, a discount or like a free drink if you dressed up or something. I'm sure there was some incentive, although I doubt we needed much incentive. The group of us went. I embraced my inner Mark. If you look closely, so it's an orange t-shirt with masking tape. It's actually masking tape making the stripes and the lines on my t-shirt. We handmade, you know, these, our name tags and buttons. You know, we made some replicas of Deb's classic buttons. We just went and like hung out and met a bunch of other weirdos who were also, you know, dressed up as, you know, folks from Empire Records, and we watched the movie and, you know, had some drinks.
There's another former guest on the pod who is a noted Empire Records fan, Sam Lopez. And I've noticed that Rex Maaaaaanning Day has become a thing on social media. People posting about it. What's your take on the resurgence? Why do you think that's happening?
It's 90s. It's the combination of 90s kids actually like living the nostalgia and this like weird, beautiful, like next generation embracing the 90s as well, so it's those like the way we used to like wear bell bottoms and like pretend like we were like in the summer of love when we were growing up, and all this stuff, and it's like, oh, this is happening now. And I think there's one here too. They do a Rex Maaaaaanning Day little like mini festival down on South Street. There's like this spot, the South Street Art Mart, and they like block off one of the side streets off South Street. They set up a screen, and they have the movie running all day, and there's just like little vendors and games, and it's fun.
The nostalgia machine is very powerful, so much so that there was the mooted stage musical version of this. That it sounds like COVID killed that a little bit, but that would have been something.
Yeah, COVID killed the musical.
Yeah, I kind of hope it happens, because you wonder what a reinterpretation of something like this could be. If using the music as a vehicle to reimagine what it could be. The High Fidelity TV show that came out a few years ago, really great, and I think is a good example of how you can take something and it's not a 1-for-1 remake. I'm kind of like interested in how we can do that, right? Like we can remix things in an intentional and fun way, creative way.
Two responses I have to this. One, dear listeners, if any of you wants to talk about the High Fidelity soundtrack, we would welcome that.
Yes.
And two, I just double checked because I forgot when Rex Maaaaaanning Day is. It's April 8th, which is the day of the solar eclipse this year. Maybe where I am right now, the solar eclipse is a big deal because apparently Canton, New York is going to be in the direct path of totality. So we're going to have like tons of people up here. They've canceled the afternoon classes so people can go look at the,
Hey, worth it. Life's short.
Assuming it's not cloudy that day.
Allison, I think you've brought us into the world of this piece. And you've painted a really excellent picture for us of the power of the soundtrack itself, how it brings us nostalgia, how it brings us to a place in time that we yearn for, and maybe that we never had, but is powerful nonetheless. So I think the case you've built has been a strong one. Let's go back over the points that you were awarded and see how you held up. I give you 20,000 points for kind of your standards for perfection. Why you felt like this was the one that holds up over time and really is deserving of that title of perfect. 60,000 points for being the first person to bring Toad the Wet Sprocket onto the pod, uttering those words in that order for the very first time. 10,000 points for Sugar High being the moment where everything comes together, and also being the moment that introduces us to Liv Tyler's mom's boyfriend. He's been introduced before us in the movie, but that's Liv Tyler's mom's boyfriend. Coyote Shivers. I give you 1,000,000 points for understanding the brief of this podcast, which is saying that this movie doesn't change me without this soundtrack, and that's one of the reasons why it's perfect. A very well made point. 9,000 points for referencing diegetic sound cues. Well done to you. 3,000 points for this movie and this soundtrack being about the day that everything changes. And you gave me a big old "Damn the Man, Save the Empire" and 11 orange M&Ms for my 60-second intro. So I'm saying this is a pretty decent board. This is not too shabby at all. But if you listen to the podcast, then you know that the decision really, it comes down to the guy himself, the man for this podcast, if you will.
Don't call me the man.
You've heard the case that Allison made for this soundtrack. You've seen the points on the board. You've seen the movie many times. Tell me, is the soundtrack to Empire Records a perfect album? Does it go to 11?
I wish I had like a great quote from the movie to like respond with. I feel like you were going to come up with something better, Allison. But yeah, of course, this album goes to 11. It can officially join our pantheon.
Well done.
All right. Well, since this is joining the pantheon, Allison, are you curious what our standout track is that we are going to contribute to this overall case here?
Incredibly curious.
There's a couple iconic songs on this album, several iconic songs, and you went non-iconic. I feel like you went with the deep cut kind of option choosing your standout track. So we, in some ways, felt obligated to choose one of the iconic ones, and we did. We chose "Till I Hear It From You" by the Gin Blossoms.
Yeah, we're basic. Sorry,
we're so basic. And I'm not even ashamed, because this song gives me chills, genuinely.
Y'all are like fresh French vanilla ice cream,
or stepping out of a bath. It's just like that.
Though we also did consider, though, the Edwyn Collins song, because, okay, I've said this before on the podcast, but 90s modern rock radio stations, for some reason, that Edwyn Collins song was on every freaking hour on Modern Rock K-Rock in Syracuse, New York. And back when, alternative music meant who knows what. And I always, every time it would come on, I'd be like, why is this song coming on after Metallica? I don't understand how these two things are connected. But it's like ingrained in my psyche, that song.
If choosing between A Girl Like You and Till I Hear It From You, A Girl Like You is a slightly more challenging song to me musically. It challenges my ear a little bit more. I can't exactly place why. There's part of me that thinks it sounds bad, but I also have been singing it all week. So it's clearly effective in some way. Whereas Till I Hear It From You is almost so, it's like you say, the vanilla ice cream. It's so accessible. It's like it wraps you and swaddles you in a way, if you grew up in that time period. That I just felt like I felt like it was a great one to go out on,
It's Jangle Pop.
Exactly.
Yeah. Allison, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and sharing this soundtrack with us. It's been so great to, I guess we didn't really get to catch up, but we got to talk about music, and at some point soon we'll actually do like a real catch up, and I'll find out how things are going for you out back in Philly.
Yeah, we need to get some, we need to escape a room and, chat about life. And
I haven't done an escape room since that one we did for my birthday in 2020 for the pandemic, the online one that we did, which was fine.
Mm-hmm. It
was fine. It wasn't great, but it was fine. Tyler, I don't know if you know this, but I am part of an undefeated escape room team.
Elite team. Escape room experts.
That would be a crack squad. I think even if it was just you two and Matthew, then like I feel like that's a good crew. I feel like I might freak out a little bit.
It's so okay. So a friend of the pod, Meg Williams, is also part of this elite team, and she has said that if you want to know what's going on inside her brain during an escape room, listen to the song "Sandstorm," and that's exactly what is going on. I have never heard something so accurate in my life as that description.
That's great. Bless you, Meg. And it was great to meet you. So such a delight to meet you. Any friend of Michael's I know is a friend of mine. So I hope we get the chance to meet in person sometime. Maybe see a show. Maybe we'll make it to the Empire Records musical together one of these days.
I mean, if that happens, we're in. And we just gotta make a pact now, here and now.
Okay.
Get it on tape.
It's happening.
When the Empire Records music, wherever we are, we may be 74.
You got yourself a deal. It's a pact.
Well, listeners, thank you so much for joining us this week. Hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about a piece of 90s iconography, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.